Most of you will be aware that there are ERDF supports usually a number of regional programs. So there were 2 regional programs in the 14-20 period, and again there'll be 2 regional programs going forward. The whole design and construct of this is slightly different. It's done at maybe a slightly more macro level, but I'll go into that now for you. And I think it will provide a context and a background for some of the decisions you might make around the type of projects you'd like to look at, perhaps under the ETC funding. And for some of you, look, there will be information on funding calls that you'll find relevant to your own organisations as well. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the topics I'm going to cover off quite briefly are the programme areas for ERDF funding, the managing authorities that are in place. I look at the money, so the ERDF allocations to Ireland and to each of the regions, and what that means for national co-funding, and then some of the restrictions that are in place in terms of what they call the thematic concentration requirements. Where do you have to spend the bulk of your funding, and what are the limits on that? I'll touch on, I suppose, what has fed into the development of the programme, so the needs analysis process, the public consultation, and also some emerging policies that very much inform the programme development. And then I'm going to share with you very much a high-level draft of the Southern, Eastern and Midland Regional Programme for 2021 to 2027. And then I'll just take you through some of the next steps, because we're still designing the programme. It's getting there, but there are still some important steps we need to take. Next slide, please. So we'll start by looking at the programme areas. So a difference, I suppose, from the 14-20 period. In the 14-20 period, we had 2 NUTS2 regions in Ireland, what was called the BMW region, and then the Southern and Eastern region. Now we have 3 NUTS2 regions in Ireland. You have the Northern and Western, which is the blue area up on the map there. You have the Southern region, which is the red and orange section at the bottom, and you have the Eastern and Midland region, which takes in Dublin and some of the surrounding counties as well. But despite that, we continue just to have 2 regional programs. So the first regional program is covering most of the BMW region, but not all of it. It's now taking in, it's aligned now with the NUTS region. So the Northern and Western Regional Programme will cover just 1 NUTS2 region. That's the Northern and Western region. And there's a reason for that. It has changed in status from a more developed region to a region in transition. So that's based on calculations around NDP. No, that's the wrong term. GDP, excuse me. So the other 2 regions, the Eastern and Midland region and the Southern region, remain, they have the status of more developed regions. Okay, so the second of the regional programs will cover those 2 regions combined. So a couple of differences there. Effectively, the Northern and Western region is slightly smaller than the previous BMW region, and then the Southern, Eastern and Midland region is slightly bigger than what was previously the Southern and Eastern region. And there are differences in co-financing rates as well. So there's 60% ERDF co-financing available in the Northern and Western regional programme, and that needs 40% then of national funding to go with it. Whereas in the Southern, Eastern and Midland region, we have 40% ERDF and then 60% national co-financing. Next slide, please. So there are 2 ERDF managing authorities, so that hasn't changed. Actually, the 2 ERDF managing authorities that were in place last time remain managing authorities for ERDF. The decision, I suppose, to appoint us was a little bit later than we would have liked in terms of, it took some time to go through, but we're both in place. I suppose a key distinction there is for the Southern, Eastern and Midland Regional Programme, while we in the Southern Regional Assembly remain the managing authority and we have legal, I suppose, status as such, within the letter appointing us, it's very clear that we're developing and implementing this programme in close collaboration with our colleagues in the Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly. So we've involved colleagues and they've been very helpful to us in terms of understanding the needs of the Eastern and Midland region, and they're very much involved in the design of the programme and will continue to be involved in the implementation of the programme. And then, look, similarly, we continue to work very closely with colleagues in the Northern and Western Regional Assembly on the design and development of their programmes. I should just mention in passing as well that the decision came a little bit later, but the Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly has been appointed as the managing authority for the EU Just Transition Fund. So they have a managing authority responsibility, but for that particular fund, and they will develop and implement that programme then in consultation with the other two regional assemblies. Next slide, please. So just around the funding, the money that's available, the Southern, Eastern and Midland programme, the total size of the programme is just over 663 million, and that's comprised of 265 million of ERDF and just under 400 million of national co-financing. So again, we're more developed regions, and that impacts on the co-funding rate. This thematic concentration requirements basically says that, again, it's a little bit different for more developed regions and regions in transition. We in the Southern, Eastern and Midland Regional Programme have to allocate 85% of our resources to Policy Objective 1 and Policy Objective 2. So Policy Objective 1 being the smarter policy objective, and Policy Objective 2 being around climate change. Within that, we also have to make sure that at least 30% of our ERDF resources are given to Policy Objective 2. And then the last requirement is that at least 8% of ERDF resources are committed to sustainable urban development. Now that could be under Policy Objective 1 or 2, or in our case, we're directing towards Policy Objective 5, and I'll come on to that in a little bit. Just to mention the Northern Western Programme, you can see there the total funding for the region is 217 million, ERDF 130 million, and national 86, nearly 87 million. Slightly different thematic concentration requirements, so that gives them some flexibility, but not a great deal. We are quite restricted in terms of where we direct our funding. Next slide, please. So just on I suppose the background to designing of the programs, really the starting point for each of the regional assemblies is that the regional spatial and economic strategies that were developed in recent years for each of the three regions. And those particular RESAs, they're called, I know we've talked about them already today. Those RESAs were developed including a huge amount of consultation with stakeholders within each of our regions, and they are trying very much to identify regional needs. So they're the starting point for us. The country-specific reports that are developed by within the European semester, so their European Commission documents, also set out what they would like to see ERDF financing focusing on. The DEEPR and the Department of Education also employed Indicon to carry out an independent needs analysis for both ERDF and ESF Plus to look at needs in each of the regions and at a national level. And that report then was published. We also carried out a public consultation based on that. So that took place in July, I think it was, of 2020. Yeah, it seems like a long time ago now. And following that, then that particular public consultation, we had workshops and published a public consultation report. So each of those documents, by the way, are available on the eufunds.ie website. Also informing the programme development is the Smart Specialisation Strategy for Ireland. Now that's still at draft status, but each of the regional assemblies have been involved through our membership of both, I suppose, as regional assemblies and through our membership of the regional enterprise plan committees, and through a project that Karen led on. We've been involved really in the development of the Smart Specialisation Strategy, so we're quite familiar with the content of it, and that has very much informed then our draft programme. I mentioned emerging policies there, the Climate Action Plan 2021 and the annex of actions that goes with it. sets out very strongly, I suppose, the actions that are required if Ireland is to meet our new ambitious targets around climate action. So that will have very much informed, it's an enormous package of investment required, and we've had to identify particular needs within that we're going to focus on. Very recent policy document, again, that's only recently in the last month been published, but we've been involved in the background, is this town centre first policy. So that's informing the development of our sustainable urban development actions. And then I'm mentioning one in particular, each of the other funds, but in particular the National Recovery and Resilience Plan has impacted in terms of being very familiar with what's within that plan, so that we're not duplicating or overlapping, and also that we can complement actions within the NROP. And finally, the National Development Plan, because again, there was a review of that, and that has been published, and we can see exactly where the funding needs are and the line of funding is available. Next slide, please. So here's a look at the draft programme. I'm focusing, I'm not going to cover the Northern and Western Regional Programme, but I'll mention it's very similar in structure to this, okay? So very, very similar, just that the funding levels may vary slightly, and in terms of I suppose the rollout may differ slightly, but effectively we're under both programmes, we're focusing on Policy Objective 1, Policy Objective 2 and Policy Objective 5 within the Common Provisions Regulations. So just to talk a little bit about Policy Objective 1, we have a range of different specific objectives that we can address. And look, one of the challenges with ERDF funding is that when you look across Europe, the ERDF funding available for our regional programs is relatively modest. And it's important for us that we target areas where there are gaps, maybe perhaps in exchequer funding. So there are a huge number of existing funding streams supporting quite a lot of the specific objectives that are set out in the regulations. And our intention is not to go in and duplicate those, but to try and complement those and to address particular gaps. So we've picked two specific objectives under PO1. A lot of the funding will be directed towards policy specific objective 1.1. And then a smaller amount then towards specific objective 1.3. So the type of actions we're talking about here, the first is capacity building within the universities, and in particular within the emerging technological universities. And that funding is going to be directed largely through both the HEA and Enterprise Ireland, and it'll be around supporting additional resources within the HEI sector. Around research, capacity building, around engagement with industry in particular. So there'll be a number of calls coming up later this year and into next year through the HEA and through Enterprise Ireland around capacity building. The second is accelerating the translation of cutting edge research into commercial applications at a regional level. So this we expect to be a particular action to be delivered through Science Foundation Ireland. We're hoping to have launch or hoping SFI are hoping to launch this later this year. It'll be directed at the HEI sector again, and it'll be inviting the creation of smart hubs for entrepreneurial research. So I have to caveat all of this to say this program is still in draft stage. It hasn't been approved by the Commission yet, so this is what it looks like at the moment. Supporting innovation, diffusion, enterprise innovation and entrepreneurship in the regions. Again, this is around hopefully an innovative call through Enterprise Ireland to support greater innovation diffusion and really focusing on particular areas that are identified through the smart specialization strategy. So look, there'll be more on that later this year. And then the fourth one to call out is strengthening and developing functional regional ecosystems. This really is about trying to build those regional ecosystems. You could see it as a successor to the regional enterprise funding that has been available in recent years. So we expect this funding again to come through Enterprise Ireland and to be available both to, yes, possibly to HEIs and research performing organisations, but more likely to collaborative groups, you know, partnerships between, it could be local authorities, HEIs, industry bodies who are willing to, I suppose, put together a consortium proposal to build out regional ecosystems. An example of this, if you're trying to make this a bit more tangible, is there's a food incubator campus in Athenry called the BIA Innovate Campus. And if you want to Google that, you'll find an example of the type of thing that might be supported. That involves capital infrastructure, so it involves buildings, but this particular call won't be limited to that. It might be more around the soft measures as well. So there might be an existing, I suppose, cluster of enterprises working together who really want to just try and build their innovation capacity, and that could be supported too. I'll move on to policy objective 2 then. Again, you've got 8 specific objectives covering everything from energy efficiency in residential to commercial and public buildings to renewable energy, to sustainable urban mobility, to circular economy. There's quite a list there, and it's just not possible to address each of those specific objectives with the funding that we have. So we're targeting the funding that we have available in this area into one particular need within our regions, and it's across each of the regions, which is around improving the energy efficiency of residential homes and specifically targeting those at risk of energy poverty. So this will be funding, again, if the program is approved, the intention is to direct this funding through Department of Enterprise Communications and Climate Action and the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, funding of measures in this particular space. It's not to say that there aren't many other needs that need to be met in this area, but we can't address them all, so we're focusing our efforts in one particular area. And then, look, Exchequer funding is going to come in, and obviously other forms of European funding to support other investment requirements. And then lastly is the Sustainable Urban Development set of actions. So we're delivering these. Our intention is to deliver them under Policy Objective 5, which is a Europe closer to its citizens. And the intention here is to support an integrated strategic approach to the regeneration of our towns, using the town centre first approach. So if you look at the town centre first policy document, you'll see mention there of ERDF funding. Really what we're trying to do is work with whether it be the local authorities or other stakeholders in the regions, that will be able to support them in developing and implementing town centre first. So you can see there in our program, I think it's 14% of our resources will be allocated to that particular specific objective, whereas the northern and western region, I think it's up to 15% in that particular region. So next slide, please. So where we're at in the process, okay, so we have to carry out a strategic environmental assessment, and a company called RSK are working with us on that at the moment. And we'd expect to have this screening reports for SEA and AA out there for public consultation, possibly as early as next week, but it's imminent. And there's a process we have to follow there, the public consultation period, and the various different steps we have to take to complete the SEA will bring us through into May, we expect. Alongside the program documents, we have to develop a performance framework methodology, setting out how we've established our selection of indicators, performance indicators, and how we set targets and the assumptions we've made. So that's a body of work that's ongoing. We will informally submit our program this month or next month to the Commission to try and get their feedback, and we've been meeting with them weekly or fortnightly at least, just to make sure that there are no surprises and that we're getting feedback all the time on what we're doing. Obviously, if there are amendments, we'll tweak the program, so that draft may change. And then the intention will be to formally submit the program and get program approval. Really, realistically, it's going to be August, September before that's likely to come. And then what you'll see is a series of calls launched by the implementing bodies. So be that Enterprise Ireland, Science Foundation Ireland, HEA, DEC, and indeed the managing authority. So in our case, the Southern Regional Assembly, and for the other programme, the Northern Western Regional Assembly. So you can see that there's a fair body of work that's been ongoing, and still some work to do to get the programme over the line. But look, for us, the key thing here is that following the period of public consultation, we'll take on board any further views, that we get a strong programme published out there and get on with the calls and get on with the implementation, so that we can have that impact on the region that we're really looking for. Okay, I'm going to finish up with that.